Hello everyone, and welcome to CRAMSURG, Clinical Research Appraisal and Methodology for Surgical Trainees, where we pick a paper fresh from the press on a hot general surgical topic. We review it for you, we present it for you, we critique its methodology for you, and provide top-of-the-field expert opinion and teaching on research appraisal and methodology. My name is Gio Perrin, and together with Professor Sababala Subramanian and Maria Digby, we bring you CRAMSURG from the wonderful region of the Yorkshire and the Humber. So, just a few words about multiple arms RCTs. I know it's late, so I'm not going to go crazy with theoretical explanations or things like that, but at least a brief introduction. So, start with simple things. What is the definition of a multi-arm RCT? Plain and simply, it's a randomized controlled trial involving 3 or more treatment arms. And so far, it's all fairly simple. How common is it? Well, if you look at trial registries, 1 in 10, 2 in 10, depending on what year you consider, of the registered RCTs are actually multi-arm, and then becoming more and more common as more different types of treatments are available for a particular type of disease. And generally speaking, if you think about it, it is an RCT. And we have spoken about RCTs extensively in our journal club, and we've got a number of videos available on our website about it. And I'll send you back to chapter 3, 4, and 5, where we give you an introduction as well as all the details about randomizations and things. And all the points that are there on how to critique and how to appraise an RCT certainly do apply to multi-arm RCTs as well. But certainly there are some complicating factors. And as such, and as I mentioned during the presentation earlier on, whenever we are designing a multi-arm RCT or looking at a multi-arm RCT, certainly we need to have a very clear idea of why we're choosing this particular type of design. What is the purpose? Because there are different reasons to do it. And with different reasons comes slightly different designs and slightly different issues as well. So generally speaking, there's 2 reasons to do a multi-arm design. The first reason is clinical. There are a number of treatments available, and that is very common when you're talking about, for example, cancer treatment. You can provide a standard set of chemotherapy and add a drug or another drug or a monoclonal antibody, for example. And you might want to compare at the same time a number of different types of treatment. This becomes very important when there is also a logistical issue. The logistical issue might be the only reason to do a multi-arm trial, but basically when you have a condition that is relatively rare or where it is very, very hard to recruit patients, you might want to try and combine 2 RCTs into one in order to accelerate your recruitment process and obtain results quicker. Often it is a mixture of the 2. Now, for the purposes of explaining differences between different types of multi-arms RCTs, I'm going to kind of split these 2, if you like, reasons or indications, and give you some examples. Furthermore, it is also important to understand whether we're doing a multi-arm RCT for an exploratory reason, so to figure out a little bit of what's going on, or to confirm a hypothesis, that is to say, actually figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So let's start by the assumption that we have a condition where multiple treatments are available. And again, this is common in oncology. So whenever we are designing a trial like this or looking at a trial like this, we need to ask ourselves, are the treatment arms that we are including in our trial related? And we have to look at the clinical question to figure that out. And often, when there are multiple treatments available, yes, the treatment arms are actually related. And I'll give you an example. This is a diagram of a actually multi-arm, multi-stage trial, which is called Stampede. And as you can see, the authors start with a number of different treatment options. The vast majority of them, actually all of them, include a basic standard of care bundle, plus other things. And the authors want to actually figure out what is the best treatment among all of them. And all these treatments are compared with each other. The one that we discussed today, the trial that we discussed today, to my eye, fits into this sort of type of design predominantly. And the vast majority of oncology multi-arm trials are fitting here. And again, I can't stress this enough. We've got a number of treatments, and we want to figure out which one works best. That is comparing with the standard of care or just comparing a number of treatments with each other. Let's move on to a different type of reasons to do this trial, so logistics. Now, in this case, the treatment arms are not necessarily related to each other. And again, you've got to look at the research question to figure this out. What do I mean? I mean that for an opportunistic reason, there are two treatments that are available, and they are separately tested versus a single control arm. But the control arm is recruited at the same time as for both treatments, to compare with both treatments. So you have treatment A and treatment B. You compare treatment A versus placebo and treatment B versus placebo, for example. Or treatment A versus standard of care, treatment B versus standard of care. You're not comparing A versus B. That's the difference compared to the design we discussed earlier on. I'll give you a practical example, which I think is quite clever. So let's think about colorectal cancer, and let's think about advanced one. And we normally give patients that do have advanced colorectal cancer continuous chemotherapy with Oxcap, which is a combination of oxaliplatin and capecitabine. Now, in this context, you might have two questions in mind. What if we put in some cetuximab? And what if instead of giving continuous chemotherapy, we do intermittent chemotherapy? Does it work? We don't know. Now, the two questions are separate. The two completely different separate questions. One is about adding a drug. One is about changing the way you administer the drug. And this has been done in the MRC COIN trial. And generally speaking, when you have a trial that is designed this way, it's not just that the questions are separate, but also the results are presented separately. And that's what the author did, and they got two publications into the Lancet. One looking at cetuximab with oxaliplatin, with Oxcap effectively versus Oxcap, and the other one is intermittent versus continuous treatment. And the authors do summarize this very well in this chart. So there's three arms, and again, I cannot stress this enough. The aims are comparing two different modes of administration, A versus C, or comparing A, standard of treatment, versus standard of treatment plus cetuximab. Two separate questions. But for convenience, the control arm is the same. So certainly, designing and conducting a trial which involves multi-arm does have a number of advantages. As we discussed, sample size reduction is a significant problem. And we do know, and we've discussed many times in this journal club, trials that just can't reach the number of patients that they needed to reach, or that take a very long time to do so. So certainly it's very attractive to have the option to just recruit one control arm and the number of different treatment arms. The recruitment is easier. Certainly, if you want to mathematically look at how much less you have to recruit, you can do that using this formula here. If you have a number of experimental agents that you want to try, your number of experimental agents minus 1 over 2 times the number of experimental agents is the amount of reduction you would get. And if you run the calculations with 3 experimental agents, you can run a multi-arm trial, and you need to recruit 37% less patients than if you were to conduct 6 separate trials, which is obviously a big advantage. Certainly, if you do explore a number of different possibilities, you have higher chances of finding a positive result. And certainly, if you can get approval for one trial that looks at 3 experimental agents, that's a massive saving time and a massive saving paperwork, as well as going through ethical committees. Now, let's have a better look at the higher chance of finding a positive result. And also, looking at how fast the recruitment is. Now, this is a chart that comes from an editorial that was published in The Lancet, concomitantly with the Stampede trial, actually. And it illustrates very well how much easier it is to recruit patients into multi-arm trials. So look at trials that have 2 arms and how much they recruit. And look at 3 arms, how much they recruit. Look at 6 arms, how much they recruit. It is quite an impressive difference. And the argument that these authors make in their editorial is that actually patients find these trials more attractive. And they've been asked a couple of times, apparently these are authors from London, by patients, why don't you run all your trials like this? And hopefully I'll convince you of the why. So we talked about having a higher chance of a positive result, right? And again, coming from the same editorial, the chances of finding a positive result become really, really, really much higher the more arms you include. And if you look at this chart, particularly for this sort of level of correlation or treatment effect, you would think, wow, why don't we just do this all the time? Why would we even bother with 2 arms trials? Well, the issue is that, as we discussed before in this journal club, the more you test, the more likely you are to find a positive result. That is just by chance. It's called multiple statistical testing. And if you look at the number of tests that you can run on a data set, the chances of hitting a false discovery become significantly high, even for a relatively low number of tests. Now, obviously, this is a well-known phenomenon that has been discussed in the literature. And if you just do a quick Google search, you'll find a lot of papers talking about multiplicity issues and multiplicity adjustment. And basically what it is just a higher chance of finding a false positive result or a type 1 error. Things to consider when you're looking at a paper that talks about multi-arms is certainly what is the reason to conduct the study? Are you just exploring to figure out if there's a superior treatment that then you want to compare with your standard of care? That's an exploratory trial. By all means, in that case, it's relatively unimportant if there is a degree of type 1 error, although you still should try and avoid it. But if you're really looking to figure out what's the best treatment out there in a bunch, because that's what you want to give your patients, you really should be careful about it. And you really should make sure that we have accounted for multiplicity and we've done some adjustments. If the arms are distinct and you're just using one single control arm to compare 2 different types of treatment against it, probably multiplicity is less of an issue. And this is the example of the colorectal trial I mentioned earlier on. If the results are presented all together, like in the trial we discussed today in the journal club, certainly you need to make sure that multiplicity adjustment has been done. And the authors of the trial of polyhexanide certainly did do that. If multiple outcomes are considered all at the same time, again, you need to adjust for that. Multiple interim analysis also affect that, as well as repeated measures of the same outcome in time. And the more subgroups you've got, the more tests you run, the more likely you are to find a false result. So all these things are important to consider when you're reading a paper that talks about or describes a multi-arm intervention. And this comes from a paper from 2017 and kind of sort of tries and make you consider when it is really important to consider multiplicity as an issue and as a source of false positive results. And certainly the enthusiasm of multi-arm trials that we have that I've discussed earlier on needs to take that into account. So just a brief summary, some key points. Multi-arm RCTs ultimately are RCTs, and most appraisal points are the same. The rationale for choosing a design like this needs to be clear. Certainly look at the research question because it does have important design repercussions that we discussed. There are numerous advantages, but there is also an important disadvantage, which is the high risk of a type 1 error. And certainly this has been picked up, and there are specific reported guidelines for multi-arm parallel group RCTs published in very prominent journals such as JAMA. So that's something, if you guys are interested, you could look at. That's it. Thank you everyone for tuning in and listening. Until next time, keep running your life with our surgical podcast.